Section 3.3, Fallacies of Weak Induction. Number 9, appeal to unqualified authority. This is an argument in which a cited authority or witness lacks credibility. There are a lot of reasons why they might lack credibility. They might lack the required expertise. They might be biased or prejudiced. They might have a motive to lie or to disseminate misinformation, or they might lack the requisite ability to perceive or recall. So, for example, if I said, Dr. Bradshaw, our family physician, has stated that the creation of muonic atoms of deuterium and tritium hold the key to producing a sustained nuclear fusion reaction at room temperature, in view of Dr. Bradley's expertise as a physician, we must conclude that this is indeed true. The conclusion deals with nuclear physics, and the authority cited is a family physician. So even though physician and physicist look very similar as far as words are concerned, they are not the same thing. So we would say it's an appeal to an unqualified authority because the person lacks the required or requisite expertise. If, on the other hand, I said David Duke, former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, has stated, quote, Jews are not good Americans, they have no understanding of what America is, unquote. On the basis of Duke's authority, we must therefore conclude that the Jews in this country are un-American. That's a person who is clearly biased. Anyone who's a member of the Ku Klux Klan, much less the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, is going to be biased against people who are Jewish and other groups of people. So his statement cannot be trusted. Also, if I said that the chairman of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company testified before Congress that tobacco is not an addictive substance and that smoking cigarettes does not produce any addiction, therefore we should believe him and conclude that smoking does not in fact lead to any addiction, that too would be an argument that contains a fallacy, because Mr. Johnson works for, he's the chairman of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company. He has a clear motive to lie, so we should not believe his statements. Or lastly, if I were to say, old Mrs. Ferguson, who is practically blind, has testified that she saw the defendant stab the victim with a bayonet while she was standing in the twilight shadows 100 yards from the incident. Therefore, members of the jury, you must find the defendant guilty. Old Mrs. Ferguson, if it is true that she is practically blind and was standing in the twilight shadows 100 yards from the incident, then it's very unlikely that she has the requisite ability to perceive. Even if she can recall, maybe she can't see well enough to know what she really saw. So the arguer in an appeal to unqualified authority, the arguer will cite an untrustworthy authority. Now, if the authority is a good authority, if they are credible, then there is no fallacy. It's only when the authority is unqualified that there's an issue. Number 10, appeal to ignorance. Now, ignorance meaning something that isn't known, not relating to quote unquote stupidity, but just knowing nothing about something. So when the premises of an argument state that nothing has been proved one way or the other about something, and then the conclusion makes a definite assertion about that other something, then the argument commits an appeal to ignorance. So here are two arguments that both contain the same fallacy. If I said on the one hand that people have been trying for centuries to provide conclusive evidence for the claims of astrology, you know, the zodiac, the signs of the zodiac, and no one has ever succeeded, therefore we must conclude that astrology is a lot of nonsense, that contains a fallacy, the fallacy of appeal to ignorance, because the arguer is saying we don't know anything about it, but we can draw a definite conclusion about it. If I were, on the other hand, to say people have been trying for centuries to disprove the claims of astrology and no one has ever succeeded, therefore we must conclude that the claims of astrology are true, the same fallacy would be committed. If we don't know anything about the claims of astrology, if they're not falsifiable, and yet a specific claim is, or a definite assertion is being made by the conclusion, then you've got an appeal to ignorance, an appeal to something that nobody knows. Number 11, a hasty generalization. Now, this is a fallacy that occurs when there's a reasonable likelihood that you're taking a sample and that sample is not representative of the group, and then you're creating a conclusion based on what you think about that sample. So a general conclusion is drawn from an atypical sample, so a sample that is not typical. So for example, if I said, today's money managers are a pack of thieves, every last one of them. Look at Bernie Madoff and Robert Allen Stanford. They ripped off billions of dollars from thousands of trusting clients. And Raj Rajaratnam profited to the tune of millions of dollars through illegal insider trading. So what they've done is they've taken 3 people who are atypical of money managers and said, I'm going to draw a conclusion about all money managers. And the fallacy is occurring because there's a reasonable likelihood that the sample is atypical, that it's not representative of the group. It could be that the sample is too small. It could be that it's not randomly selected, any of those things. Number 12, false cause. The fallacy of false cause occurs when the link between the premises and the conclusion depends upon some imagined causal connection. In other words, one thing is the cause of another. And it's a connection that probably does not exist. When you suspect that an argument has committed the false cause fallacy, you as the reader or listener should be able to figure out what the conclusion was, or at least that the conclusion depends on the supposition that X causes Y when X probably doesn't cause Y at all. So for example, if I said during the past 2 months, every time that the cheerleaders have worn blue ribbons in their hair, the basketball team has been defeated. Therefore, to prevent defeats in the future, the cheerleaders should get rid of those blue ribbons. I couldn't say that the blue ribbons that the cheerleaders are wearing are the cause of the basketball team being defeated. That's an imagined or non-existent causal connection. So even though many people like their lucky socks or their lucky sweater or whatever the article of clothing or thing may be, the truth of the matter is that probably it's not causing anything to happen, right? There's an imagined or non-existent or minor causal connection. So it's a fallacy when you see something like that. All right, the next one is slippery slope. It's a variety of false cause, so it kind of depends on a chain reaction though. It's kind of the same. It occurs when the conclusion of an argument rests on an alleged chain reaction and there is not sufficient reason to think that the chain reaction will actually take place. So for example, if we looked at 2 different arguments that contain the same fallacy again, if I said immediate steps should be taken to outlaw pornography once and for all. So let's say this is the top of this big slippery slope, right? This is the slope. Here's some grass at the bottom of it. And I don't know, here's a tree. Please ignore the bad quality of my artwork. So if we start off here at the top with immediate steps should be taken to outlaw pornography once and for all, then someone says, because this is going to happen, this chain reaction. First, the continued manufacture and sale of pornographic material will almost certainly lead to an increase in sex-related crimes such as rape and incest. And then this in turn will gradually erode the moral fabric of society and result in an increase of crimes of all sorts. And eventually we get to the bottom of the hill. It will lead to the total collapse of civilization. Right? Now, is it likely that if we start off here, we end up here if there's no evidence that this chain reaction is going to occur? No, so it's a fallacy. And if I started up here and said attempts to outlaw pornography threaten basic civil rights and should be summarily abandoned, so I start off with the opposite premise, and I start saying things like, if it's outlawed, then this will happen, censorship of newspapers and news magazines. is only a short step away. And then there are going to be censorship of textbooks and political speeches and content of lectures delivered by university professors, and complete mind control by the central government will be the inevitable result. Again, it's as if we've taken one step off, and instead of just ending up here, we end up all the way at the bottom of the hill. That's the idea of the slippery slope. But it is, in fact, a fallacy. So again, it depends on an unlikely chain reaction of causes. And by the way, it's usually resting on an emotional conviction on the part of the arguer that a certain action or policy is bad. And so they're trying to trump up support for their position by citing all sorts of dire consequences that are going to result. Then the last one that we're going to look at in this section is weak analogy. So this is a situation in which an analogy or similarity between two things is not strong enough to support the conclusion that the arguer is drawing. So if I said Amber's dog is similar in many ways to Kyle's cat, both like being petted, they enjoy being around others, they beg for food at the dinner table, and they sleep with their owners. Amber's dog loves to romp on the beach with Amber, therefore Kyle's cat probably loves to romp on the beach with Kyle. No, there are similarities that are cited between Amber's dog and Kyle's cat, but they don't have anything to do with the cat's attitude toward romping on the beach. And most cats, although I'm sure there are some exceptions, don't like water and don't like romping on the beach in the same way that many dogs do. So it's a weak analogy. It's a conclusion that depends on a defective similarity or a weak similarity. So those are the fallacies of weak induction.